Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, can you believe it? It is a real live ICBA cast. You thought it had gone the way of the dodo bird, but no, the dodos are back.
We're back.
We're back. I'm
Back
Jordan
in fine
Bateman.
form.
I'm the Director of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICBA. Joined as always by
Chris Gardner, President of ICBA.
Chris. I'm just reading this local magazine called Vancouver Magazine, and I'm reading about all these powerful people in British Columbia. David Eby, #1, John Horgan, #2. Bet that went over well in the caucus room. The owner of the Canucks, #3. Frank Giustra, one of the great philanthropists and businessmen. Ian Gillespie.
It's quite the list.
Going through this list. The chief medical officer for Vancouver Coastal Health. Michael Audane, the founder of Polygon Homes. Some guy named Jimmy Pattison. Bob Rennie, the condo king. And then I come to number 13, and I can hardly believe my eyes. Chris Gardner, president of the mighty ICBA, number 13 on the Power 50 list. Chris, how do you feel?
Well, you know, it's obviously it's a great honor to be recognized, but I think it reflects.
How are you ahead of the CEO of TELUS?
I didn't put the list together. The only thing I will say is that I think it reflects well on the work we've been doing at ICBA on behalf of our members and for free enterprise, and we have been doing a lot, whether it's Site C, Kinder Morgan, the payroll tax, union-only hiring, which you find unfair and discriminatory, fighting proportional representation. On a lot of files, we've been in some cases, in a lot of those cases, leading the discussion, and we've certainly been having an impact. Our voice is being heard. So I think that's really what that reflects. I don't think it's anything that other than that, and obviously it's a great recognition for all the hard work that everyone at ICB has been doing on behalf of our members.
I finished tied for 51st on the top 50 list, so very close. I see, no offense to Prem Gill, the fine CEO of Creative BC, number 36, although I would point out that you would have to multiply the film industry by several times over to get to the reach of the construction industry, but that's just a little inside baseball. Look at that, Andrew Weaver, all the way down to 41.
He dropped
40 places.
He was co-#1 last year.
That's right. Dropped 40 places down into Seth Rogen territory.
Well, I think that reflects the fact that it's hard if you step back and look at what's happened in the last, nearly year and a half since the NDP formed government with the support of the Green Party. What has Andrew Weaver actually gotten out of this deal? And I don't think he really has much to show for it. The government's moving ahead with Site C. Kinder Morgan has been, the pipelines have been purchased by the federal government. They're looking to build the project. LNG Canada has gone ahead with a final investment decision, the biggest private sector investment in the country.
In history.
All of those things he fought against.
Yeah.
He has gotten very little out of this. So I think the list accurately reflects the fact that he is not co-#1.
That's a lot of shade being thrown by number 13 there. Boy, that's not true. But look, he did get one thing out of this, and that's his much desired prop rep debate. Now, of course, Andrew Weaver actually ran on a platform and demanded in negotiations that prop rep just be brought in without even consulting the public. John Horgan, who, number 2 on the list, and frankly, not someone who has been performing all that well on our kind of issues. To Horgan's credit, he at least put in a referendum, as rigged and stacked a deck as it is. He did resist Weaver's temptation just to roll out prop rep and forget what the public has to say about it. But Chris, you and I watched the debate on Thursday night. McLean, McKay, and I on BC Poly Hot Stove recapped it right after. We felt a little bit like after we were hearing some of the early pundits, like we were swimming against the flow a little bit because we felt like it was such a good night for Andrew Wilkinson. Yeah. Although I noticed that in the days that followed, both Keith Baldry, Rob Shaw, a number of independent observers, Nelson Bennett, Business of Vancouver, clearly scored it a victory for Andrew Wilkinson.
Yeah, listen, it was a very important. It was an important debate for both leaders, but I think it was more important for Andrew because he's a new leader of the party. A lot of British Columbians still hadn't seen much of him because he just assumed the position a few months earlier. So important night for him. I think he did more than he had to do. And to the point you're making, I think objectively, if you looked at it, John Horgan did not make the case effectively for providing the public with reasons why they should be voting yes, why we need to change our existing system. And I think think Andrew Wilkinson did a very good job of raising questions in people's minds about, well, why are we changing? We don't know how 2 of the 3 systems will operate. And that point was driven home by Melanie Mark, a minister of the Crown, was on the doorsteps, campaigning, handing out brochures, encouraging voters to support to vote yes. And when asked, how is it going to work? How will this impact British Columbians? She said on Global TV, I have a political science degree, I'm a member of cabinet, but I really don't know how this is going to operate. I can't explain it to you. And I think that's that puts everything in context of what we're dealing with here. Is Premier Horgan went out a few weeks ago to all the mayors and councillors in British Columbia and said, join me in taking a leap of faith. And that's really what it is. It is a leap of faith. There's not enough information. The process has been rushed. It's rigged in a lot of ways, and people should be voting no.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is interesting to see. At the very beginning of this process, Prop Rep had a big lead over First Past the Post. Those trend lines have crossed, but they seem stalled at almost dead even. So, really, this referendum's a coin flip as to what's going to happen.
Well, and it shows how the NDP started off and said, okay, we're gonna 5 months out from the vote, beginning July 1. No one can spend a dime expressing their views on this referendum unless you go through a very complicated and convoluted process of registering and trying to raise money from your friends and family and whoever else would be supporting
in very small increments, which actually penalizes associations like ours who have membership dues and other income that we don't need to go back to our members and beg them for $1,200 a pop at a time. It's a kind of a ludicrous way to handle campaign reform.
So they started off with a big lead in the spring, and that's now we're even in the polls. It demonstrates that despite skewing the playing field in their favor at every single turn.
This guy, number 1.
That's right.
He did it.
They haven't been able to close the deal. And I think John Horgan kept saying over and over again that British Columbians and voters are smart enough to figure this out, and I think he's right. They are figuring it out. It's wrong for British Columbia, and I don't think the Premier or the Attorney General have been upfront, open and transparent with what they're doing with the process. We have never said, let's not hold a referendum. We said, well, if you're going to hold a referendum, and we think the question's been answered, it was answered no in 2005, answered no in 2009, but okay, they're going to go ahead and hold a referendum. Follow that process. Where you engage people over many years, you come up with a very clear question: existing system versus another choice. So it's a clear
with
choice.
Maps, with details,
with all of the information you need, and
with knowing how many votes you're going to get.
Have an appropriate threshold, not 50% plus 1 to make a fundamental change to our democracy. But
you can't change the NDP constitution with 50% plus 1. Yet you can change the democratic nature of the province.
And the funny thing is that they're doing this under the guise of more people will be able to participate, it'll be more democratic and more open, but the process they're using has not been open, hasn't been transparent. Our democracy deserves better than this from this government, and British Columbians deserve better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. David Eby, is he number 1 if this thing goes down, despite the fact that he rigged it? Is he number 1 next year?
Well, listen. I think David Eby, a little bit of an awkward situation when you're the Attorney General.
He's a neutral arbiter, Chris.
And you're ranked ahead of your boss.
He wrote the ballot.
But I would say, listen, if Prop Rep does not succeed, then he's gonna suffer a little bit because he designed the whole process.
Totally. He dreamed up 2 of the systems, plucked them out of thin air.
Yeah, and it is. So yeah, I think he will suffer.
Yeah, and I think.
And rightly so.
I do think within their caucus there are Eby folks and there are Horgan folks, and no doubt the Horgan folks won't shed too many tears if Eby's brought down a notch or 2.
Right.
It'll also, I think, change the media perception of him. This nonsense about him being a crusading Attorney General, always up for the little guy, I think that withers away with a political loss like this, especially given the way he's stacked the deck. I'm surprised that a number of the reporters and columnists who've been so firm on the way this system was set up, the way this vote was set up has been unfair. And you got to give credit to the press gallery for calling them like they see them on this one.
Yeah, well, and I think that crystallized in the debate, where I think the Premier really was at a loss to explain to British Columbians in a very clear way what the advantages of proportional representation were and how it would be better. And he couldn't answer that question. And then he threw in the the phrase that some young people have been coining.
You're woke, you're lit.
Yes, and that was
Cringeworthy.
Whoever advised him to say that, it was just really poor advice.
The NDP, it sounds like, through back channels, that he freelanced that.
He shouldn't be freelancing.
No, he should not be freelancing. So look, it was a great week for Andrew Wilkinson. I'm going to have a piece up on the Orca today or tomorrow, depending on when the editor-in-chief puts it up. But essentially saying, if the BC Liberals win the next election, the turnaround really started this week. Strong policy convention, really robust debate on the floor about the things that the Liberals in the past had been too shy to go after, such as ICBC. Excellent speech by Andrew Wilkinson. Several standing ovations, including some led by millennials and by women in the room, which neither of whom particularly took to the former leader, Christy Clark. Rolling that into a great week in question period, exposing Mabel Elmore for claiming $61 a day in per diems when she was on a $19 per week welfare food challenge. That made national headlines. More shady emails and public servants doing political things exposed on Ginny Sims' watch. And then Doug McCallum scrapping LRT for SkyTrain and putting Horgan in a box there. And then culminating in that debate on Thursday night. Look, you could not have scripted a better week in opposition for the BC Liberals than last week.
Yeah, and they needed that week. I think anytime you go through leadership conventions don't unify parties; they divide them in a lot of ways. It takes a long time for the party to recalibrate under a new leader, particularly when you're coming off successive leaders who've been premier and you've been in government. So now you're in opposition for the first time in 16 years. Yeah. You're under a new leader.
Yeah. You don't have any favors to pass around. You can't make you can't make your opponent finance minister. You can't.
So it's challenging, but I think Andrew Wilkinson has done a good job of bringing the caucus together, bringing the party together. Strong performance in debate against John Horgan over Prop Rep. So I think they feel they've got the wind in their back a bit. A lot of work to do. There's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But listen, I think they feel that this was a very, very important week for them.
I'm told they only have 7 or 8 days left in this session, or 6 days left. 4 next week and then 2 the week after. That's plenty of time for the Liberals to carry that momentum through. Six good question periods, and they finish off with a bunch of momentum going into Christmas, and they feel a lot better about their December break. Actually, at the end of the month, by the way, the First Nations leadership group is meeting with the cabinet. That's why they're cutting the session down early, because of course you can't sacrifice all those cabinet ministers and hold the confidence of the House. Right. So kind of an interesting thing there. And of course, Prop Rep ballots are due on the 30th. All right, so that is Prop Rep. The injunction, our appeal for an injunction, was rejected by the Court of Appeals. However, our original case is still set to be heard in January. That case really depends on how this thing turns out.
Yeah, so we filed, and the funny thing about our court action, we filed on June the 28th, and we went to the court in early July and said, listen, to the government, there are important issues at play here that need to be heard by a court. Let's do this as quickly as we can. End of July, and the response is, we're not ready, we need more time. August, same response from the government, we're not ready, we need more time. September, October, November, December. So our court date is January 21st, 2019.
Yes.
Now, when you think of all the effort that the government has has put toward coming up with the proportional representation process and what information voters would receive, for them to say in court, we're not ready, we're not prepared, I think is astounding and remarkable. And so our response is, well, if you're not ready to defend the process in the referendum, how do you expect British Columbians to be ready to cast a vote? Yeah. So, but nonetheless, the court date will be in January 21st, 2019. That will be an interesting date should proportional representation pass, because obviously we'll be challenging the process and the legitimacy of everything that had happened since they passed the regulations in June. And if Prop Rep fails, then it's likely a moot date,
right?
And we wouldn't need to be in court. So we'll see.
We'll either be very busy, or we will not.
That's right.
Either way, hopefully, if you have not marked your ballot yet, mark it for first past the post, one and done. Stick it back in the mail, and let's get this. Let's just defeat this thing outright and send a real message to the government that stacking the deck in these kind of silly games is not the way to go, even if you are number one on the Power 50 list.
And what was the turnout as of today? A little over 5%.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
only that's what came in today? I haven't checked for today.
It's like 5.7%.
I expected that to be much higher.
Yeah. So
That's interesting.
yeah, it's troubling to think
Yeah.
that we could end up with a much lower turnout than people had anticipated, and what that would mean for the legitimacy of this whole process.
Yeah, we're now at 3.5 weeks since ballots went out. I mean, you would expect them to start coming back. If by the end of this week they haven't cracked 10%, that will be stunning.
I think the government will be panicking a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, they have to be in Election BC's Hot Little Hands in Victoria on the 30th. You cannot drop them in the mail. Not postmarked, don't matter. They have to be in the 30th. So if you don't get it in this week or very early next week, by say Monday or Tuesday, take it to a Service BC outlet instead. And they can get those, courier those over to Elections BC right away.
Right.
That's interesting. We've heard rumors, though, that there might be a count as early as December 13th.
Yeah, they keep saying that they're going to have they're going to finish the count before Christmas,
which is
that would be and
it'll be a 24/7 thing. Yeah, they'll be working full bore on that. It took HST almost a month. It took TransLink about the same. So that's an interesting. Must be nice to have millions in provincial funding in order to count those ballots up quicker than those of us who waited on TransLink did. All right, other court action. We also have our ongoing dispute over PLAs winding its way through court. I understand the government filed some affidavits, not really addressing any of the core issues.
Yeah, so we expect to be in court in the first few months of 2019. And obviously, we're challenging the fact that what the government is effectively saying is if you want to work on a construction project in British Columbia that's funded by the provincial government, you're going to need to join not any old union, one of only 19 building trades unions.
Yes.
So if you're a member of a union that's not building trades, that's not good enough. And if you are not part of a union, that's certainly not good enough. So for 85% of the construction workforce in this province, they're freezing them out and they're saying you're not welcome to work in these projects. We find that unfair, discriminatory, and frankly offensive. We, along with a host of others, are challenging this policy in BC Supreme Court, and we'll be in court in the early part of 2019.
Right. Hopefully not January 21st, since we already have a lawyer booked that day.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, this thing is crazy. The government filed some affidavits trying to push back last week. Frankly, it's more fan fiction than anything else, than actually rooted in the law.
Right.
But we shall see, as many court observers note, there has been a very strong skewing towards the labor side at higher levels of court recently, but this one is so flagrant, we're hoping that the court recognizes that and gives people just the opportunity to work. That's all we're asking for. Give us the opportunity to work without having to join one of these building trades unions.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned on that.
Yeah, stay tuned on that. And stay tuned next week. Chris, 1 week from today, you and I will be running around like crazy.
That's right.
Basking in the greatness that is number 4, the Green Bay Packers, number 1 in your hearts. Brett Lorenzo Favre is in Vancouver. ICBA 43rd annual AGM and gala dinner next week. I'm getting pretty excited about this.
It's not Roger Staubach.
It's not Roger Staubach.
Troy Aikman.
It is not Troy Aikman. He apparently was booked, but maybe next year. Maybe next year Troy Aikman for you. But this year Brett Favre for me. So
it's going to be an exciting night.
We've been working on our questions. Yeah. He's such an interesting guy. He's been through more injuries than you can shake a stick at, and you read his bio, and you're like, oh yeah, that game he was playing on a broken ankle, and in that game he had 3 broken ribs, and that game he had just come off a concussion, and it's pretty amazing to start 18 years, to never miss a day of work in 18 years, period, let alone as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, a remarkable career, and the event sold out 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we're excited.
Huge room.
Yeah.
It's going to be big.
It'll be a great night.
Yeah. So what are you getting him to sign for you?
You know what? Peyton Manning signed the football. I'm going to get Brett Favre to sign the same football.
Yes.
Start my little quarterback football.
Exactly. We're doing the same. Peyton signed a football for my son Jackson and I, so we're going to get Brett to sign that as well. It'll be 2 Hall of Famers. He's not in the Hall of Fame yet, but I'm pretty confident Peyton's going to squeak in. We'll have that quarterback. But then also we have a Green Bay Packer helmet. I'm going to get Brett to sign that. I'm trying to decide whether I should ask him to sign it Super Bowl 31 champion or Hall of Fame HOF 2016. I think I might go Super Bowl champion.
Right.
Because that's how we measure success in Green Bay, by our Super Bowls and our World Championships. This is the 100th season of Green Bay Packer football. We've won 13 championships. 13% of the time.
That's okay.
13% of the time we're winning. Unfortunately, many of those were preloaded into the 30s, but whatever. Curly Lambeau still count. Anything else happening that we should mention? I don't know, sessions ending. They seem to be wandering their way off, and NDP is still doing stuff. And I think we've hit all our issues. I'm trying to think of anything else.
That's it. I think that's it.
Yeah, actually, watch next week. We were releasing a document called the Construction Monitor, sort of a state of the construction industry. So watch for that at the ICBA It has a number of interesting facts about construction and just how large an industry it is, and how you compare it to the sexy industries of movie making or tourism, and construction's contribution to GDP far exceeds all of those. And it's a real tribute to the 250,000 British Columbians who got up this morning and are doing the real work of building this province while we sit and chat on podcasts.
That's right.
That's right.
There you go.
Number 13 in Vancouver Magazine. Number 1 in your hearts. Number 4 for the Packers. Number 1A also in your hearts.
There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll talk to
Have
you
a
again
good
soon.
day.